On July 29, 2005, a 16-year-old girl named Amber Marie Rose was driving her 2005 Chevrolet Cobalt through Dentsville, Maryland, when something went wrong. Her car crashed into a tree. Her airbags never deployed. She died on impact. General Motors knew exactly what had happened. A contractor hired by federal regulators found that the ignition had moved from the run position to the accessory position, cutting power to the steering, the brakes, and the airbags. It was the first death linked to a defect General Motors had known about for years. The company opened a file. They did not issue a recall. 9 years and 123 more deaths later, they finally did. The part that killed Amber Marie Rose would have cost 57 cents to fix. To understand the crash, you need to understand the road that led there. The archive opens in 2001. General Motors is designing a new ignition switch for its small cars. The switch is supposed to meet a specific standard. It needs between 10 and 20 Newton centimeters of torque to turn from run to accessory. This matters because if the torque is too low, the key can slip out of the run position while you're driving. If that happens, your engine shuts off, your power steering dies, your power brakes die, and your airbags are disabled because General Motors designed them to only deploy when the ignition is in the run position. The supplier, Delphi, tested the switch. It failed to meet specifications. The torque was too low. An engineer named Ray DiGiorgio was the design release engineer responsible for the switch. He approved it anyway. The switch went into the Saturn Ion in late 2002. Then it went into the Chevrolet Cobalt, the Pontiac G5, the Chevrolet HHR, the Pontiac Solstice, and the Saturn Sky. Over the next decade, it would go into 2.6 million vehicles. The problem started almost immediately. During pre-production testing of the Cobalt in 2004, a General Motors program quality manager personally experienced the ignition shutting off while he was driving. He did not classify it as a safety issue. He called it a customer convenience concern. In March 2005, the engineering manager of the Cobalt opened an investigation. The investigation found two possible fixes. The first would redesign the ignition switch mounting and lengthen the spring. This was rejected as too expensive. The second would change the key fob design from a slot opening to a smaller hole, reducing the weight that could dangle from the key. The cost of this second fix was 57 cents per vehicle. General Motors rejected it. An internal memo from 2005 explained the reasoning. Tooling costs and piece price is too high, and none of the solutions represent an acceptable business case. They did not fix the switch. They did not recall the cars. Instead, they sent a technical service bulletin to dealers in December 2005. The bulletin blamed the problem on oversized keychains and short drivers whose knees might bump the key. It advised dealers to tell customers to remove heavy items from their keychains. Only 474 customers ever received the recommended key insert. 4 months before that bulletin went out, Amber Marie Rose was dead. By 2006, General Motors had documented crashes in Louisiana, Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Florida, and West Virginia. Each time, the pattern was the same. The engine shut off, the airbags failed to deploy, and someone was killed or seriously injured. The company opened file after file, each one named for the victim: Freeman, Frey, Gath, Grondona, McCormick. The files accumulated. The recall never came. In April 2006, something remarkable happened. Ray DiGiorgio, the same engineer who had approved the defective switch 5 years earlier, authorized a redesign. The new switch had a longer spring and a longer detent plunger, producing higher torque. It met specifications, but DiGiorgio did something that would delay justice for years. He didn't change the part number. In the auto industry, changing a part's design requires changing its part number. This is how engineers, investigators, and regulators track which vehicles have which components. Without a new part number, there was no way to know that post-2006 vehicles had a different switch than pre-2006 vehicles. The fix was invisible. DeGiorgio would later claim, under oath, that he didn't remember authorizing the change. When shown evidence that he had signed the work order, he said he had forgotten. A congressional investigator would later call this repeatedly lying under oath. Senator Claire McCaskill said General Motors had fostered a culture of cover-up. Meanwhile, the crashes continued. In October 2007, a 2005 Cobalt crashed in Wisconsin. Two young women, 18-year-old Natasha Weigel and 15-year-old Amy Rademacher, were killed. A state trooper investigated and found that the ignition had been in the accessory position. He reported his findings to General Motors. General Motors discounted the report. An internal investigator named Brian Stoffer asked DeGiorgio whether the switch had ever been changed. DeGiorgio told him it had not. Stoffer was, as the later investigation would put it, misled by DeGiorgio's statement. For years, General Motors told anyone who asked that there was no correlation between the ignition switch and the crashes. The investigation went nowhere. In 2009, General Motors filed for bankruptcy. The company was restructured with $50 billion in taxpayer bailout money. The new GM emerged from bankruptcy, claiming it was a different company, literally. Under the restructuring agreement, the new General Motors would not be liable for claims arising from vehicles sold by the old General Motors. This legal shield would later become a point of bitter contention. On March 10, 2010, Brooke Melton celebrated her 29th birthday by going to work as a pediatric nurse in suburban Atlanta. That evening, she was driving her 2005 Cobalt to meet her boyfriend for dinner when the CR lost power on a rain-slicked highway. The car hydroplaned, crossed the center line, and was struck by an oncoming vehicle. Brooke died that night. Her father, Ken Melton, refused to accept that the crash was her fault. 3 days before the crash, she had taken the car to a Chevrolet dealer because the engine had inexplicably shut off while she was driving. The dealer found nothing wrong. Ken Melton hired a lawyer named Lance Cooper. Cooper bought the wreckage of Brooke's Cobalt for $548. He hired a forensic mechanic named Charlie Miller to examine it. Miller found that the car's data recorder showed the vehicle had decelerated from 58 miles per hour to 0 in 3 to 4 seconds before impact. The only explanation was that the car had lost power. Miller also found that the ignition was in the accessory position at the moment of impact. Then Miller discovered the 2005 technical service bulletin that blamed the problem on keychains and short drivers. He called Cooper. "GM knows something," he said, "and they're not telling you." Cooper began deposing General Motors engineers. In April 2013, he sat across from Ray DeGiorgio and asked him about the ignition switch. DeGiorgio denied knowledge of any design change. Cooper's engineering expert had already X-rayed switches from early and late model Cobalts and discovered they were different. When confronted with this evidence, DeGiorgio said he didn't remember authorizing any change. He said, "I don't recall ever authorizing such a change." He said it at least 10 times. In October 2013, General Motors finally obtained a document from Delphi showing that DeGiorgio had signed off on the redesign in April 2006. His signature was on the work order. He had specifically agreed to implement the change without changing the part number. In February 2014, 9 years after the first death, 8 years after the switch was secretly redesigned, General Motors announced a recall. When the company finally acted, it initially recalled only 800,000 vehicles and acknowledged only 13 deaths. The true number was far higher. On April 1, 2014, Mary Barra testified before Congress. Lawmakers held up the defective ignition switch, a small piece of metal and plastic, and noted that replacing it would have cost 57 cents. "That was not acceptable. That is not the way we do business in today's General Motors," Barra said, disavowing decisions made before her tenure. Laura Christian, Amber Marie Rose's birth mother, also testified. "Our daughters, sons, sisters, brothers, mothers, fathers, wives, and husbands are gone," she told Congress, "because they were a cost of doing business General Motors style." In June 2014, former federal prosecutor Anton Veluki S. released a 315-page report on what had gone wrong. The report described a company that operated in silos, where employees didn't share information. It described a culture of the GM nod, meetings where everyone nodded in agreement, but no one actually took action. General Motors fired 15 employees. 5 more were disciplined. Ray DiGiorgio was among those terminated. No one was criminally prosecuted. In September 2015, General Motors agreed to pay $900 million to settle criminal charges. Kenneth Feinberg, the compensation expert who had administered the September 11th Victim Fund, was hired to manage payouts to victims. When his work was complete, he approved compensation for 124 deaths and 275 injuries, nearly 10 times higher than the 13 deaths General Motors had originally acknowledged. Families of the dead received at least $1 million each. General Motors set aside $625 million for the compensation fund, but more than 90% of claims were rejected. The true death toll may never be known. The 57 cents was just the cost of the replacement part. 2.6 million vehicles times 57 cents equals roughly $1.5 million. General Motors ultimately paid $900 million in criminal penalties, $625 million in victim compensation, $120 million in class action settlements, and untold millions more in legal fees. The total cost exceeded $2 billion. For a part that cost 57 cents, consider the contrast. When Toyota faced its sudden acceleration crisis in 2010, Chief Executive Akio Toyoda flew to Washington and apologized before Congress. The company established compensation funds and conducted investigations. It was a disaster, but Toyota acted relatively quickly once the scope became clear. General Motors knew about its problem for 13 years. Employees proposed fixes that were rejected as too expensive. Engineers redesigned the switch and then hid the change. Investigators who got too close were misled. And every time a victim's family sued, the company settled confidentially and kept selling cars with the defective switch. 3 mistakes turned 57 cents into 124 deaths. First, General Motors approved a part they knew didn't meet specifications. In 2001, Delphi told them the switch failed the torque test. Ray DiGiorgio approved it anyway. Second, they treated a safety defect as a business problem. The March 2005 memo is damning. None of the solutions represent an acceptable business case. That phrase appears nowhere in the vocabulary of safety engineering. It's the language of cost-benefit analysis applied to human lives. Third, they hid the fix. When DiGiorgio finally authorized the redesigned switch in 2006, the ethical path was clear. Change the part number, issue a recall, inform regulators. Instead, he changed the part without documentation. People continued dying in pre-2006 vehicles while post-2006 vehicles worked fine. The company knew why. They said nothing. Mary Barra promised that the new General Motors would be different. She created a vice president of global vehicle safety position. She instituted new reporting requirements. She spoke of moving from a cost culture to a customer culture. But there's something the new General Motors never did. Accept that anyone should go to prison. 124 people died. The company admitted to concealing defects. Engineers lied under oath. Documents were hidden. Fixes were implemented in secret. And the penalty was $900 million and some job losses. No one was charged criminally. Ray DiGiorgio, who approved the defective switch and then lied about redesigning it, walked away without facing prosecution. As one lawyer put it, when individuals, through their reckless conduct, cause someone to die, they go to jail. When large corporations, such as General Motors, through their reckless conduct, cause hundreds of people to die, they simply pay a fine. The ignition switch victims were disproportionately young. Most were under 25. They were driving inexpensive, compact cars because that's what young people could afford. They had heavy keychains because teenagers put things on keychains. They were exactly the customers General Motors designed these cars to attract, and they were the ones who paid for General Motors' cost culture with their lives. Amber Marie Rose was 16. Natasha Weigel was 18. Amy Rademacher was 15. Brooke Melton was 29, driving home on her birthday. 57 cents. That was the cost of the spring. $900 million. That was the cost of getting caught. 124 deaths. That was the cost of making the numbers work on a spreadsheet. Ken Melton, Brooke's father, said something at a press conference that cuts through all the legal language and corporate apologies. If it's caused one single death, to me that's enough. One single death is enough to make a recall. General Motors had 124 chances to learn that lesson. They chose the 57 cents instead. Subscribe to CR Crash Capitalism. Every like helps document what boardrooms hope stays buried.